Margaret sat by the window of her small home in suburban Ohio, sipping a cup of tea as the autumn sunlight spilled gently across her living room. She was 59 years old, and while life had given her both joys and heartbreaks, she had found comfort in routine. Her days were quiet, her mornings filled with reading, gardening, and the occasional visit from her daughter, who lived a few towns away. She didn't expect anything extraordinary anymore. That morning had felt like any other, until she opened her front door to see a young delivery boy standing there with a wide smile and a box of groceries in his arms. "Good morning, ma'am," the boy said cheerfully, shifting the box to balance its weight. He looked barely 20, his hair messy from the wind, but his eyes were bright with kindness. Margaret blinked in surprise. She usually had the same delivery man who was older, quiet, and quick, but this was someone new. "Oh, hello," she replied softly, stepping aside. "I wasn't expecting anyone different today." He chuckled. "They asked me to cover this route. First day on the job, actually. Name's Ethan." Margaret smiled faintly, watching as he carried the box inside and gently placed it on her kitchen counter. There was something about the way he moved, careful not to let anything slip, that reminded her of her late husband, always patient, always thoughtful. "Thank you, Ethan. That's very kind of you," she said. "No problem at all. I'm just glad I didn't drop the eggs," he joked, glancing around the tidy kitchen. Margaret laughed lightly, and it startled her. She hadn't heard herself laugh like that in a while. It felt good. As he was about to leave, she thought of something and called out, "Would you like a glass of lemonade before you go? It's homemade." He hesitated, then smiled. "Sure, that sounds great." They sat at the small dining table, and Margaret poured the lemonade into tall glasses. Ethan looked around the room with curiosity, noting the framed family pictures, the vase of flowers by the window, and the stack of novels on the counter. "Do you live alone?" he asked politely, not prying but simply making conversation. "Yes, for a while now," Margaret said with a soft smile. "My daughter visits when she can, but she has her own family to care for." Ethan nodded. "I understand. My mom says the same thing about me not being around much since I started college, but I try to check in on her." Something in his words touched Margaret. She hadn't realized how much she missed simple conversations like these, light, genuine, and free of pity. They talked for a little longer about school, books, and the way the leaves painted the streets in orange and red this time of year. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan returned often, sometimes with deliveries, sometimes just to check in. Margaret noticed that he always had a way of brightening the room, whether it was by telling a silly story about his classes or offering to fix small things around the house. One day, when the wind knocked over a flower pot in her garden, Ethan bent down immediately, brushing off the dirt from his hands as he set it back in place. Margaret watched him quietly, her eyes welling with unexpected tears. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "You just reminded me of someone I loved very much." He always looked after little things like that. Ethan's expression softened. "I'm glad I could help, even in a small way." One rainy evening, Margaret heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find Ethan standing there, soaked from head to toe, holding an umbrella. "I was nearby and thought I'd bring you this," he said, handing it to her with a grin. "Didn't want you caught in the rain tomorrow." She took it slowly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "That's very thoughtful of you, Ethan." "Thank you." Moments like these reminded her that kindness wasn't bound by age, nor was friendship. She found herself sharing stories from her past, how she met her husband at a community dance, how she used to take her daughter on long road trips across the country, how she once dreamed of being a teacher. Ethan listened with genuine interest, laughing at her lighter memories and sitting quietly through the tender ones. One afternoon, she brought out an old photo album. They sat together on the couch, flipping through the yellowed pages, filled with photographs. Ethan looked at each one carefully, asking questions, smiling at the candid shots of Margaret's younger days. "You've lived such a full life," he said sincerely. "It's amazing hearing these stories." Margaret looked at him, touched by his words. "Life is full, yes, but it's also ongoing. I didn't expect to find a new friend at this age." Ethan smiled warmly. I didn't expect to either, but I'm glad I did. As the months went by, their bond grew naturally. Margaret found herself looking forward to his visits, not because she needed help, but because his presence reminded her that she was still part of the living world, still capable of connecting, still worthy of being heard. Ethan, in turn, found a kind of wisdom and comfort in Margaret's company that he hadn't realized he was missing. The story of Margaret and Ethan wasn't one of romance or obligation. It was one of respect, of two people from different generations teaching each other that kindness has no age. Margaret's quiet house felt a little less empty, and Ethan's busy life felt a little more grounded. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, Margaret stood on her porch waving goodbye. Ethan walked down the street, carrying nothing but a small smile and the promise to return. For the first time in years, Margaret felt that her heart had opened again, not to loss, but to the possibility of joy, in whatever form it arrived. And in that moment, she knew that life could still surprise her.